Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review the Peripheral Season 1, Episode 4. So, this episode, I feel, if Flynn is not to be built up to be like the John Connor, like, leading the resistance against the Rise of Machines, then, like, I don't know what this character is really going to be, period, for the show. What is the point of this show, then? And more than likely, I feel like this show may end in just one season. Because, man, was this pilot episode of this show exciting. Now that we've gotten into episode 4, it's sleep-inducing. It's really to help you if you need a sleep aid, because, man, did this dialogue for this episode go nowhere, or is just a stalling attempt now. So this is already halfway through the season. Are we going to have another 3 episodes of them just delaying the inevitable and then going on and finally giving you a reason in the season finale to really to really care? So there really is not much to talk about for this episode, so hopefully I'm going to be able to get through spoilers fairly quickly. But so, in the beginning of this episode, we have a young Wilf and Alita in 2075. And we also are to go in to this episode to find out that Flynn is starting to get really sick from possibly the headset or something else. There could be a possibility that guys like Lev may be going on and kicking something off in the past to protect his future. So we're possibly getting to see that in this episode. And so, beyond the whole jackpot event that they showcase to Flynn basically telling her how the future is all going to break down and how people are going to massively die or have power outages, or this is where the apocalypse is to have started, yada yada yada. So really, that whole like apocalypse thing by the end, that was really interesting, but you just have to get through the boring of the rest of the episode, because we have a thing of dialogue between Charisse and Lev that go nowhere. Lev and Wilf, any of the dialogue between them, nowhere. We have Constantine that ends up talking to Flynn and Burton. Guess where that goes? Nowhere. So we just have a lot of that going on in this episode. So with that said, I think it's about that time to just go into a double 5 time territory, because I think it's about that time yet again to, of course, go into spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this episode. So, the grading of this episode, I would just state that this episode was, like, really bad. I could dare say that it's almost getting pretty close to just, like, man, this episode had a interesting pilot, but it's too far gone now to get any good. So, with that said, I think it's about that time. Let's go into it. So, London, 2075. We have Wilf, who's with Alita. They're scavenging for food. We have a kid who is to collect all the food together, and not like how Wilf is not really put forth any real effort to scavenge for food. So the kids go on to really just have Wilf like need to share with Lita as far as her food is concerned, and so they end up kind of separating. So Lita starts giving Wilf part of her food, and Wilf's like, "No, I'm not going to eat that." But so Wilf is to go on and see some commotion going outside, and so Wilf investigates it just to find out that it's some kind of hologram. But the real thing that is going on is we have certain people that are trying to go on and grab these kids and try to collect them. And so kind of transitioning us to have Flynn go on and be brushing her teeth. We all of a sudden see Flynn kind of crushing this toothpaste container, and so Flynn again is having these hand problems. So Flynn goes on to talk to Burton, and while Flynn is going on to talk to Burton, it seems that Flynn is to kind of have this weird bruise kind of come into her eye. Not only that, Flynn is to also just kind of fall down and have this grand mal seizure. So Burton rushes Flynn to the hospital, and so this doctor is to go on and state, like, well, like it seems that she had a grand mal seizure from the symptoms of which that you were talking about. So the nurse, of course, asks Flynn, it's like, well, hey, like, how could you have possibly have gotten this grand mal seizure? And they, of course, is like, well, like, there was a new headset that we had gotten recently. It's like, well, okay, like, who were the people who owns this headset? It's like, well, uh, some Colombian company. And so the doctor goes on to tell Burton, it's like, well, hey, like, let me know the name of that company so I can go on and I can make them aware of what's going on here, as if this is some defect. And Burton's like, yeah, sure, I'll get right to that, because Burton, of course, is going to want to turn around and try to stall this doctor to not give her any of this kind of information, because, of course, what difference will it make? The equipment is basically just coming from the future. So we come to find out we have Flynn, we have Burton. So we have Constantine that makes his way to both Constantine, or both Constantine, both Burton and Flynn's place. So Constantine is to state, it's like, well, hey, I came here in my own car, in my own clothes, to tell you guys that, like, I'm on your side, like, I'm your friend. And so, like if you need help, like, I'm here. And Burton and Flynn are to kind of hear Constantine out, but they're also to just turn around and tell him, like, well, that's nice and all, but you can go ahead and just F off. And Constantine's like, well, okay, well, I tried. So we go on to have Flynn, who is to put on this headset and be watching some old home videos. And Burton is like, well, should you be wearing a headset right now? Because maybe it all has something to do with you wearing headsets. And Flynn is just like whatever. Like, I'm just gonna go on and do this, and like it'll be fine. So Burton is to go on to think that he should have the guys go on to go to the future to talk to these people and maybe bust some heads if that's what they need to do. So we have the guys who are just like, well, wait a minute, like, what happens if you go into the future and you get injured? Like, that's one less person that we don't have in the past, yada, yada, yada. So, come to find out, we have Connor that goes to the future in Flynn's avatar. And so, what ends up happening is Connor is to come back alive, and he's kind of looking at himself like have feet and have hands and everything like that. So we have Ash, who immediately figures out that this is not Flynn, this is somebody else. And so they quickly have this person getting unregistered. And so what ends up happening is like Connor is screaming in agony, but then Connor is to state to the guys, it's like, well, hey, like, replug me in again, because we need to tell these guys what's going on. So Connor gets sent back, and he ends up telling these guys like what's going on with Flynn. So we have Wilf, who shows up in Flynn's kind of headset while she's viewing her home videos or her home video images, whatever this is really to be called. So Flynn's like memories. So Flynn goes on and is to see this Halloween situation where Flynn is wearing her father's Halloween coat that uh, that her father is wearing. So we have Wilf that's stating that it's like, well, hey, your father's wearing your coat, and so Flynn just says the opposite. It's like, no, I'm wearing his. So we have Flynn as a younger girl with Burton as a younger kid going around trick or treating with their father. And so Wilf goes on to ask Flynn, it's like, well, hey, what is this? Flynn is like, well, it's just kind of like a memory. So Wilf is a state that he had found out through Flynn's people what had happened to her. And so Wilf is wanting Flynn to go back to the future so they can go on and explain things to her. And so, come to find out, they realize in this episode that Lef is somehow trying to benefit himself from the past to help him out in the future. So, Wilf goes on to talk to Lev about this, and Lev is to go on and say it's like, well, well, yeah, we're like starting to go on and take steps to try and protect Lev's family and start to put like kind of things in place to have kind of like these robots also in the past. So, anyways, or people that they can kind of control in the past so that way they can kind of do their dirty work or do whatever they want for them in the past. So, as well as also Lev is telling like Wilf, it's like, well, why do you think that I had Alita kind of work for me before? So Wilf is starting to slowly realize that maybe he should not go on and possibly trust Lev anymore, because maybe Lev is probably starting to use things for his own benefit. So we have Charisse. Charisse is going on and speaking to a bot or a Coid that is to look like Daniel. So they are to kind of program this droid up, and so Charisse wants it to be specifically just like Daniel, to where Daniel would not go on and really disagree so easily uh, with Charisse, and so this droid is kind of getting programmed to do what she asks, and so on and so forth. So Charisse later goes on and talks to Lev, and is to tell Lev that there are three different walls that are to be kind of set up here, and those three walls are to all represent something. And so, after putting up these three walls, then Shreese puts the ceiling up, and Lev is like, "Well, okay, like, what does the ceiling mean?" And Sharice is just like, well, maybe it's to be like what's kind of coming down on us. So, like, maybe you should kind of get your ducks in a row to make sure that, like, the wall or the ceiling isn't falling. So, Lev hears Sharice out, but he doesn't give a rip. He doesn't care. So, Sharice leaves, and Lev is like, like, goodbye. So, we go on to have Flynn go back into the future to now realize that she had like her body had been kind of used for her to play this kind of goofy kids game, and Ash is just like, well, hey, they needed a fourth, and like, if anything, like, it's not like you were really doing anything. So Flynn goes on and is to state to Ash that she's going to go on to talk to Wilf, and so Flynn is to also need to figure out like what is going to go on in the future. And Ash is like, well, like, I can't go on and have you figure that out. So because Flynn is going on and doing some investigating, some exploring, because of course when Flynn is to talk to both Burton and Connor, uh, both Burton and Connor also want a body so that way they can go into the future. But Burton is to also tell Flynn, it's like, well, hey, like, what would you normally do when you would go into a sim? It's like, well, like, I would like disregard everything and break all the rules and probably die a lot till I find out what all the rules are, and then just kind of uh, figure everything out that way. So Burton is like, well, yeah, like, that's what you need to do here. Just kind of disregard everything that everyone's going to say until you can figure a lot more out. So Flynn is wanting to take that as like she's going to explore and investigate and find out everything about the past so that way she can prevent all of it, and Ash will not allow that to happen. So we go on to have Ash and her assistant, who of course ends up being a person that I don't think is even listed. Oh no, wait, um, Ocean, Ocean, and so Ocean is trying to go on and is trying to hack into the past, while we have a hacker from the past, uh, who is Macon, who is trying to like hack into the future. So like each one of these characters, like we're consistently having Flynn who loses control and then regains control, and so both the hackers are kind of hacking, and so we have Ocean that is talking to Lev and stating that Wilf is going to have to get involved in all this, and so that then leads, uh, of course, Wilf to talk to Flynn and is to get her to the point of telling her the truth about the future. So Wilf takes Flynn to this place and is to explain the future to her and how like in like 2039 is when everything starts to like happen, because this is 30 or 2032. So in 7 years from now, or no wait, yeah, in 7 years from Flynn's now, there's going to be power outages. There's going to be horrible illnesses like pandemics, and a lot of people are going to die. And like not only that, but like the world is going to just restructure and so on and so forth. So like it's a horrific like apocalypse like scenario, and so we have, of course, Flynn who's getting all of this information, and so they tell her all this, and then just kind of let her go back to the past. So yeah, really, that is the quickest and easiest just kind of wrap up of this episode. And so when Flynn comes back, Burton and Connor ask him, it's like, well, like what did they say about the bodies? It's like, well, hey, yeah, like they're working on it. And so Flynn ends up knowing about future information, and so like that seems to be the real like pull away from especially Flynn, who is to have said to Ash, it's like, well, hey, like, why did Alita tell me that in 10 years from now, like my time, I'm probably going to die or I'm probably going to get wiped out? And so they finally had to explain all that. So, speaking of explaining all that, I think I went on to explain most of this episode, and let me know in the comments below if there's anything that I did forget about, because I'm sure there's some dialogue or some detail or whichever that misstepped about. So, with that said, I think I'm just gonna go on and just get out of here. This is gonna be a quick review, but there wasn't much to this episode. So with that said, goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody. I guess I can also go on and state about the Lev Wilf conversations. So I'll get to that. So in the beginning of the episode, we have Wilf who is talking to Lev, and it's to talk about Alita's like output from her implant. And so Lev ends up talking to Wilf that there's a possibility that Wilf will probably have to accept that Alita will probably be dead soon. And Wilf is like, well, what do you mean? And so Lev tells Wolf, it's like, well, like if she doesn't have like the output for her implant, she's going to die. So you probably should just accept that now. And so we also had the dialogue where Wilf confronts Lev about what Lev is doing in the past, and Lev is stating that he's going on and trying to, uh, like, why not figure out a way to benefit his past more? Uh, but then Lev is to also state that they're probably going on and doing some real experimenting with the past. And so, like, what are they trying to go on to state here? That more than likely the people of the future could be causing this this apocalypse or this catastrophe event, and maybe it might be like past versus future. That could be interesting. Like if the future is going on and trying to wipe the past out, like that might be an interesting story here. But with that said, we won't know until they go on and have some real meaningful dialogue in these episodes. So, with that said, goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.